Welcome, film or cinematic realms. We go back and forth. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me, as always, is my co-host and fellow cinephile, Amy Blackfire. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Manaro Geek. Welcome, Manaro. It's great to finally have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so normally what we do is we jump right into talking about the movie, which in today's case is going to be the movie Hidden Figures, which first time I saw the movie, so I'm very happy. I enjoyed it a lot. But we want to take a minute first to just talk to you, Manaro. You haven't been on the channel before, so tell the folks a bit about yourself and what you do online.
There's not really much to tell. I go on YouTube and pretty much just talk about whatever tickles my fancy. My channel actually started back in season 6 of Game of Thrones. I had been a lurker in the fandom for quite some time, and I met online a fellow fandom, a fellow Game of Thrones fan. I put up a video just randomly, and he responded, and he invited me to come online with him, and thus started my journey into YouTube. So, even though I started out doing YouTube, doing Game of Thrones, I usually talk about different other topics that I find interesting, not necessarily just only Game of Thrones. I like other things. I got into the Harry Potter world. I got into the I actually would read Lord of the Rings yearly up until 2 years ago. I think that 2 years ago was the last time I read the book in full. And a lot of other sci-fi things. And so I've kind of expanded to just discussing whatever sci-fi, anime, or whatever other topics. I even started doing a little bit of current events. So I have a Let's Chat that I started a little while ago. So every so often I'll do a Let's Chat where we just talk about, current things that are happening with respect to democracy and how we can be engaged. And that's pretty much it. And I've met some really wonderful people, and through that, I was able to meet the both of you. So again, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, and Manaro does these ginger ale chats that are live, but then deleted later. So follow her channel and turn on that bell, because when she goes lives on ginger ale, that is an exclusive. You have to watch it then. It is deleted later because she and her guests get raunchy. I know, because I was on the last one.
And now I have a couple things to say about that. One, first of all, I want to say I'm delighted to hear that you've made a habit out of reading Lord of the Rings every year, with the exception of, of late. But, the world's been kind of turned upside down. So, but because, I'm sure, as maybe you've heard, I'm obsessed with Lord of the Rings.
It's not like he's wearing anything that would let you know that.
No, I didn't. So... I didn't catch that at all.
But you and I have got to just geek out at some point, and we typically do film stuff here. And we have, of course, covered the Lord of the Rings movies, but I'm sure we can find an excuse to do something about that.
You can always, there's always something that you can find to talk about with respect to Lord of the Rings, to the point where I'm a geek in the fact that my life is a musical. Like, there's always a music attached to some event in life, right? And so whenever there's an event in my life, there's always a song attached to it. And I grew up watching musicals as a little girl on television. And so it pretty much stuck with me even now as an adult. I swear I'm always listening to music. It's like the sound of music is like the soundtrack. in my head. And another thing is I quote things a lot, and I quote a lot of Lord of the Rings, and I also do quote a lot of Star Wars. So and now Game of Thrones. So if it's something that sticks with me, yeah.
You said the magic word. Do you know what it was? Soundtracks.
Yeah, music. Get him started on music. And yeah, do you have 3 hours, Manaro, just on this one? You also, Nessie and I were on your channel, Manaro, to talk about The Blood of Zeus. So you also do some animated shows, which I appreciate because people, they become adults and they go, well, animated shows are for kids. And like, have you met anime? That's not true.
I think what they do is they kind of confuse cartoons and animation with
exactly.
anime. And so to them, it's all the same. But if you look at, I think anime is a little bit more thought provoking in the topics that they talk about, like they present. And I have to say, Japanese writers, if you've ever read like a manga arc or watched a manga, there's always some societal, even through all of the other stuff that's going on, there's always a societal tie in all of the stories where you can pull a lesson from. And I think their storytelling is absolutely wonderful. I love the way that they have a great way of telling a story, and they tell it through animation, and which is one of the things that I love about anime, whether I'm reading it or whether I'm watching it.
I want to say,
and Robbie mentions Princess Mononoke. We're doing that in May, so please tune back in, Robbie. We're going to talk about that. That is actually my
excellent
animated movie. So I'm going to be talking about that, and you will see me geek out all about Princess Mononoke in May. So definitely tune back in, Robbie. I know you're a regular watcher. We're very excited to have you.
Now, before we move on, I do want to go back to the ginger ale chats because it was so funny because you had been talking about those. You mentioned those because you came on to Here Be Dragons and talked to Stephen Nessie and me, and you talked about these ginger ale chats, and I'm like, and then I said something and you said, we're gonna have to have you on at some point, John. I think I was saying I think it was we were on the Expanse stream and there may have been a comment about Bobby. Not gonna go further than that. And so you said gonna have to have you on. I was like, oh, that sounds like it might be fun. And then you invited Amy on, and I was like, I'm kind of a little bit jealous. She said she's gonna have me on. And but
it was a girl power ginger ale chat, John. Come on.
I know, but then I watched it and I was like, oh.
Yeah,
you learned a thing or two about your co-host that maybe should have not.
Well, the ginger ale chats were actually a happy accident in my YouTube life. I love ginger ale because I don't really drink, so ginger ale is like my drink of choice, right? It's like drinking champagne to me. That's what it reminds me of, bubbly. So I drink ginger ale. So I initially decided to do a PSA announcement, and I called it Ginger Ale Chat. And it was just me coming on YouTube to just talk about what I'd like to do with my channel. This is like, I'm going to say this was like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. That's how long ago it was. And I came online. Back then, I didn't even have 100 subscribers. I don't even think I had 50 subscribers then. So I came on. It was just a few people that came on, and I was, talking about here's some things I want to talk about. I think I want to do. I want to introduce to my channel. At that point, I think I said I wanted to start to do the reread project that I had done on my channel, and then it took a life of its own, and Sam, who's Sam09 here on YouTube, she came on with me, and next thing I knew, we were on for like I think 16 hours. Like I never thought that something that was meant to be something that was just a random thing to do eventually took a life of its own. Now, I recently just decided to make it private because of the topics that we talk about, and because I wanted to be sensitive to the fact that, people have lives that, you know what I mean? And now that the internet is getting a lot bigger, and people are always looking for ways to use things in not so nice reasons. And as a way of kind of protecting people, you know, and not allowing them having a bit of fun to be used against them for any way, I make them private as a way of protecting the people that I have on and the people that are in the chat. Me personally, I'm retired. It really doesn't matter so it doesn't bother me whoever wants to see it. But I wanted to be sensitive to, the people that I have on and the people that are in the chats. And I don't want anybody to, not that I'm that important or anybody scoping my channel for anything, but you never know about these things,
Yeah, I know if I wind up on one of those, I will probably be very happy about that being private. Anyway.
We have to make, I want to do an all male. I have to do an all male because I used to do both male and female, and then the guys kind of got scared off. I don't know if it was because the women were getting a little, they couldn't handle a lot of the things that the women were doing. So a lot of the men kind of like dropped off and got scared off from coming on. But I would like to actually do a ginger ale chat where it's all males. If you and any other guys want to just come on, I'll just do an all guy ginger ale chat, and I will just facilitate, because that's all I really do. I facilitate the conversations and let everybody else just have fun. And I just interject every once in a while.
I think Amy has taken care of me being shy about certain topics. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so anyway, so we wanted to have you on because this is, of course, Black History Month, and we really wanted to highlight Black stories. So Amy and I had like a list of movies that we were thinking about, but honestly, we just turned it over to you and we were like, what movie would you like to talk about? Because we really wanted to have you on just to talk. And it worked out that you did pick one of the titles on the list, but in truth, we would have talked about anything. We're just happy to have you. But you picked Hidden Figures. Why don't you just start off by telling us why this film?
This film, to me, as mostly I picked it mostly because of what it represents, right? Black women have been historical figures in Black history for such a long time, and this movie in particular for me touched me in a way where there was a time where it was cool to be a nerd and to be able to excel in a space where you don't see too many Black women anymore, and to see the accomplishments of these women despite the challenges that they faced, and they were part of American history, which most people probably would have never known about had it not been for this movie. And so This movie, in a sense, tells the story of these Black women, these group of Black women, and what their contribution was to putting a man in space. And it talked about it showed their level of intelligence. It showed them as real human beings with real human problems, and despite the challenges that they face in a segregated South, they were still able to help to accomplish the impossible. And so that movie kind of spoke to the little girl in me, really more so than the woman in me. So that's why I chose it.
Yeah, I'm rather disappointed to say that I did not know the story going into watching it. Um, and, I mean, on the one hand, that's sadly not surprising, and, but it's incredibly disappointing. But yeah, I enjoyed the heck out of the movie, and it's interesting that you talk about seeing yourself as a little girl. I love that the film does start off with her as a young girl, and you see how brilliant she is, and it's it's just it's a fantastic story. Amy, when did you see this movie? I'm just curious. Did you see it when it was in? Oh, you said you saw it on the airplane, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
my mom and my godmother went to see it. They've been best friends since the 70s, and one of the things they like to do is go see movies, and especially feminist movies, together. So they went to see it in theaters, and they told me it was amazing, and I just hadn't seen it yet. And then I was on an airplane, and it was one of the smaller ones, not one of the ones with the screens where you pick the movie. And the one that was playing was Hidden Figures. So I enjoyed it, but I wasn't able to see it in full, like fully enjoy it, because you know how it is on a plane, you're doing something else, you go to the bathroom. So I had a really good time watching it on the big screen with the surround sound, and I had my popcorn, and so I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And I think something I definitely want to talk about later, but I'll just put it out there now, was Kirsten Dunst, correct?
Yeah.
Her character, boy, do I have to say some things about white women in general at this time, but in this movie, that line she has, "Oh, I really don't got nothing against y'all." Ooh, that got me so hard, because so many white women back then, said, well, that's how it is. I personally don't have something against, people of color, when, you're part of the problem. And when we see her, when we see the woman who is so brilliant at the calculations work in a place with all white men, and there is one white woman, right? And you do see her talk to the white woman, but the white woman doesn't really help her out very much until the end, and it's a little not fully there, right? So this kind of idea of women, helping women doesn't cross racial lines at this time, and in some ways still today.
Yeah, I was going to say, that felt to me like it was speaking as much to the present as to the past.
Absolutely.
Because when Octavia Spencer's character comes back and says, I know you probably believe that.
Exactly.
That feels like a very current thing to say, because that is still very much the case.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think what ends up happening, it's a way of trying to absolve yourself of guilt, but at the same time trying to say the right thing. It's an amalgamation of things, and I think this movie, even a lot of the themes of this movie with respect to the contrast between the white women and the black women, and the roles that they play. Because if you notice, the computers were all black women. It wasn't the white women. They were actually doing the computing before they had the IBM machine. And so they were actually the computers. They were the one that were actually doing the calculations, doing all of the numbers. And you would have thought that they would have held had a higher sense of value, but they, even in the work that they did, which was way more valuable than work than their white counterparts were doing, they were still treated as if they were not as important. And so I think there was a contrast. I think that contrast kind of played into the role that Kirsten Dunst, who played Mrs. Mitchell, and Octavia Spencer, who played Mrs. Vaughn. You can see the contrast between the both of them, because in essence, Mrs. Vaughn's position and job was actually more important than what Mrs. Mitchell was doing. But because of again, the where the time period they were in. Of course, Miss Mitchell held a higher position, and it gave her a reason to feel some sense of superiority. And I think there was also a sense of jealousy that also may have, that was permeating because of what they were doing compared to what the other people were doing. And I think that also played a part in, because of the time era, that gave them a reason why they can feel superior to their counterparts, because of the fact that they were white, and it was a segregated place. So and so when they make comments like that, well, I really don't have anything. It's not me. If it was up to me, it wouldn't be that way. If it, these are just the way things are. You just have to play your position, and then I play my position, and then everything will be okay. Like, we just need to keep this status quo. So that still plays till today. In a lot of, if you have conversations with a lot of women in the workspace who probably have counterparts, you may hear these things. And a lot of times, they're white women, sometimes, even if they don't mean to be condescending, or they don't mean to be ignorant, they say these things thinking that they're being good, or they're saying the right thing. And sometimes I think we've come to a place now where you can't keep crying ignorance. We are now in the 21st century, and so it is time for people to start being more responsible and taking the time to actually learn, right? That the only thing that separates us is probably, where we live, maybe, where we grow up, our cultures, but truly, we're all the same in so many different ways. We're all human beings. We all are born, and then we all eventually die. And so it's what you do in between birth and death that really will truly end up defining you. And I think there were a lot of defining moments with these women with respect to their counterparts. I even look back to Mary Jackson, when she goes in front of the judge to plead her case as to why she's supposed to go, why she should be allowed to go to an all-white school. And she pleads her case brilliantly.
Yeah.
She
knows exactly what
she strokes
say
his ego, and that's the way to, and I also think what I found so interesting about this movie is the assumption that people of color, especially women of color, will just adapt, that the system doesn't need to change, people of color just need to adapt. And you finally see that moment. You see kind of little moments where what would be considered as blowing up was finally them saying what was in their head, right? So we had her when, when she was doing the calculations, she had to run half a mile to go to the bathroom because she wasn't allowed to use the bathrooms where she was. Then her boss finally got onto her for it, and she let him have it. And I love that scene because it's everything that she was thinking in her head that she knew she couldn't say. And I think at that point she thought, you know what, I've been working my butt off. And like, they even put a separate coffee pot just for her, one person in that whole big room. And it was so disrespectful, and it was so degrading. And and she just kept doing what they said, which was adapt. But eventually, they push you too far, basically.
I took issue with Kevin Costner's character a bit with respect to that. In that this is your work environment, this is your environment, and you run the show, right? And you understand the time that you're in. Granted, you may not be, it may not matter to you with respect to color, gender. As long as the person can do the job, you may not care. But you have to be at least cognizant, or at least aware that this is the only Black person, the only in a room full of whites, that you got to read the room, right? And it wasn't until she blew up that he took action. But that whole time, you mean to tell me he didn't pass by and notice the colored coffee pot?
Yeah.
You mean to tell me that he was just so unaware that he didn't notice a whites only bathroom? Like, were you that I don't think you couldn't have been that ignorant to the work environment that you have. Like, you are a white man in an all white building, and you are inviting a Black person who normally doesn't work in that building. There's an East and a West campus. In the East campus is where all the whites work. The West campus is where all the Blacks work. So you need to tell me that you weren't going to be aware of that, like you weren't, or you didn't put certain things in place. But that also speaks to some people are willfully, they're negligently ignorant. I won't say willfully ignorant, because I don't think it was willful on his part, but it was definitely negligent on his part, that he didn't take that into consideration, which left her. But I think also for dramatics, she had to blow up. You know what I mean? Because the point had to be made, because we as the viewers, or those of us that are watching this movie, it kind of draws you into to make you understand her plight and how she was truly treated.
I'm sorry.
Truly,
the comment by Ayub Patton, you can't expect
you can't expect men to be observant. Yeah, to be that observant. I will say for him, he kind of saw it as, it's only a problem when someone yells in my face and says it's a problem, and that is not leadership. Leadership is recognizing a problem before it blows up.
Right.
And that's what made him a bad boss. And also in the end, when she gets sent back to the computing department and he's like, I'm sorry, there really isn't anything I could do. But then when she came in and asked him if something was wrong, he said no. Yeah, there is something wrong. Just be straight with her. You know?
Well, I also do like the tail end of that comment, which was, it's out of my hands, if you can believe that, which,
Come on, man. Like, you could like see the BS just flying all over the place. Those are like anecdotes, right? Those are comments. Again, that's another comment that's made to kind of like make you feel less bad about what it is that you're doing, and kind of just absolving yourself of some level of guilt, right?
Yeah.
Even though you know the truth.
I also liked the gendered language that was throughout the movie. So we have, it's going to be a long night, call your wives.
Call your wives.
And then we also had, this course hasn't been designed for teaching women. There are these, what's interesting is that a lot of times you can tell when people are saying certain things, they specifically mean Black women, but they won't say that. If it was a white woman, they probably would be a little bit nicer about a lot of this. But when he was saying, it's not designed for women, he means also a specific type of woman. And that's why I think that this movie does a really good job of showing the sexism and racism mixed together in a terrible pie that is, that these women have to deal with all the time.
Although quite funny, that scene brought me back to, and this is, I'll just take off topic just to kind of piggyback on that point.
Oh no, we can't do that.
Do that on this. How dare you? We never do that on this channel.
Just to piggyback on, I'm sure you are both familiar with the show series Outlander. I've only watched 2 seasons of it, so I don't know what happened after season 2. But but when Claire, right?
Claire, yeah.
When Claire goes back to the future and she decides to pursue medicine, when she goes to school, she is the only woman, and she ends up partnering with the only Black person in her class. And so they're the two kind of what you call the outsiders of their class in that. And I think that was in the 60s, I believe. I believe she went back in time into the 60s, was it?
Yes, originally she's in the 40s, but when she returns, it's the 60s. Which, by the way, this means that you've actually watched the 3rd season, because that's in season 3.
Oh, was it season 3? Okay, great. Yeah. All right, because I know that was the last season that I watched, because that was the season. That was at the ending. She ends up going back into, and then I just and then I found Black Sails, and then that was all she wrote. So
no, but that's what's so funny is that in the latter half of season 3, they go into the Caribbean and they use a lot of the Black Sails like sets and ships. So you could have just kept going, and then you would have gotten the Black Sail stuff.
Yeah, but to Amy's point, that there was it's kind of like one of those things that Black women kind of face. Usually I'll tell people that when I came into this world, I came in with 3 major strikes against me when I came into this world. And in order, I came into this world Black, I came into this world a female, and I came into this world a first-generation immigrant. And so those 3 things were obstacles that I had to overcome as part of navigating my world, right? Because for me, everything that how I navigate my world is always through the lens of I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm the child of an immigrant. And so even though it shouldn't be that way, I should just navigate my world as an American, right? Because I was born here. That's not how the world viewed me, right? In the grander scheme of things, right? Because usually when growing up, people would, other kids would tease me, right? Because English wasn't my first language. Oddly enough, I was born here, but English was not my first language. I spoke my native language because I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother didn't really speak English very well. And so whatever English I did know was it was heavily laced with an accent because I learned most of my English while talking to my grandmother. And so it wasn't until, matriculating into, formal school and going through school and immersing more and more into the English language, I eventually lost the stronger accent that I had. And now I just have a New York accent. That's it. I don't know if that's better. That's better or that's worse. So, but that's how I navigate my world. And so these women, that was something that I could relate, and that's how they had to navigate the world, right? They made the best of the situation, right? They're smart women, they're intelligent, they are able to actually work in a field that allows them to thrive, quote unquote, somewhat thrive in their intelligence, but only up to a certain limit, right? There's a limit set. Yeah, you can do this, but you have to do this within this boundary. And this movie kind of showed you the challenges that they had to face in order to push through those boundaries in order for them to excel, when you look at Miss Vaughn, she wanted to move up, which is any person who works, when you go work somewhere, you want to be able to, achieve, promote. You want to be able to promote. She wanted to be she was doing the work of a supervisor. I want to be a supervisor, but she couldn't. Why? Because she was Black, and they didn't want to give her. They wanted her to do the job, but they didn't want to give her the title. And for her, it was great that she didn't allow that to stop her. So she had to make herself marketable. She had to make herself valuable, right? You had to make yourself valuable. So when the IBM machine came, and we saw how she came in, and first of all, she took a book from the library, but she made herself valuable, right? Because she was able to figure out the IBM computer when none of her other counterparts could.
Oh my God, those white guys were like, get away from that. And they're like, wait a second, it's working.
Right?
None of those white boys could figure it out.
Exactly.
Like, let's just be honest. And then she comes in, and sometimes it takes a badass Black woman to figure it out.
It's like I'm watching that, and it's like, oh God, typical. And then I'm just like, just wait for it to drop. It's coming.
Just wait. They'll realize that they need her a lot. Yeah, way more.
But that was very astute of her to, when she saw the computers, she understood that once those computers were up and running, they would no longer need her or her crew.
Exactly. They would need to
so
go from
she had to make them still viable, right?
Absolutely.
They still had to be viable. And she had the forethought to be able to say, you know what? I'm going to make sure they're still going to need us, because somebody has to manage these systems.
Yeah.
And she took it upon herself to do that. And not only that, she taught all of the other computers everything that they needed to know to be able to operate and manage those systems. So
that whole build up to that moment feels like a heist almost, because it's like she's working behind the scenes, she's training all the girls. It's like just waiting to spring. We're gonna figure this out. They're gonna need us, and then we're
exactly.
And then we'll be taking over. Yeah.
She saw the writing on the wall, right? She saw the writing on the wall, and I don't think Mrs. Mitchell wasn't even going to really tell them about it. And if she hadn't had the forethought to say, you know what, if we don't make ourselves valuable, we're all going to be out of a job. Yeah. And she saw an opportunity and took it. And not only did she take it, she made sure to bring everybody else along with her.
She didn't pull up the ladder after she had climbed. And you see that kind of with Mrs. Mitchell. She kind of keeps it from her workers until the very end, and then all of a sudden needs her help and asks, hey, and I believe her first name's Dorothy, correct?
Yes.
She goes, Dorothy, maybe you could, teach some of my girls. And she goes, well, that's not up to me. That'd be up to my supervisor. Using the system against her, right? She wouldn't let her be a supervisor. Right. All of a sudden, you want her to do supervisor work. Well, that ain't her job. She's not going to do it.
I gotta tell you, I just went through this movie going, Mary Jane, I'm so disappointed in you.
I really did like not like the parts, but they were very telling and a very important part of the movie when you would see how the system was set up to stop them from achieving things, even if they were totally capable. One of the examples is, you need to take these extra classes to be an engineer, but only white people can take those classes. Right? And then there's also the library book itself that Manaro was talking about earlier. She needed to learn about Fortran. Well, there weren't books about Fortran in the quote unquote, and I hate using this word, colored section.
Yeah.
So you really had that. And I think what's interesting about this whole NASA operation going on is that they needed women of color to make it work, but they didn't see them as actually being a part of the team, even though they were working toward a common goal. And this is something that I saw with my paternal grandfather, who was very racist. He would make fun of even, like, he was a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, and he would make fun of the players that were on his team. And I remember going, Papa, those are your athletes. You're cheering for them. And he would be making fun of their hair. And it was just, it was disgusting, quite frankly. And,
and like,
so there's this idea, if you're working toward a common goal, why don't you see them as an important part of that team?
And I know that, perhaps this was not, I mean, from what I understand, this was not just a job title given to, the black workers. I'm sure there were white ones as well, but just the job title of computers sounds, like less than human.
Dehumanizing.
We're not giving you the respect of.
It was dehumanizing. It was dehumanizing. Again, well, even though they were doing the works of the computer, there was no reason to call them computers. But then again, I don't know. I don't know if data analysts might have been a better word, or maybe I know that over time job titles kind of change in order to be more to keep up with the times and modern era, and so they may change things. It could have been, again, it was a very white male dominated society, so they probably didn't. They probably.
Yeah, and I do understand.
They probably just took the simplest thing.
To be fair, computer equals someone who computes, and I do understand that. But
it was seen as busy work.
There does feel like an implication
not necessarily needing someone who is intelligent, right? And that's you ladies crunch the numbers and then bring it and let the real men then do the work, right? There was this idea that they were never the ones, right? You had the woman who, I'm so sorry, I cannot remember character names. Everyone knows this about me in the chat. I'm really bad at remembering character names, but I believe it was Mary, the one who wanted to be the engineer, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So she was starting to be asked, what do you think is wrong with this? She was starting to problem solve, and the computers were not allowed to do that. They were there to crunch the numbers, and it was then the white men that would take that and decide what to adjust and what to change. And so these women, they couldn't have done it without these women, right? They had these ideas, and they had no idea if the math would even work until they gave it to these women. So, they were the white men were the theory, but these women were the practice. They were the ones doing the footwork and making it actually happen. And that's why Hidden Figures is such an amazing title for this movie. It doesn't just represent the three main women. It also represents all of these women, all these female computers. And, it was also, of course, white women that were doing this job as well. And I'm so glad that we were highlighting black female computers. That's the thing is like computer before, what we have now meant a woman sitting there and calculating everything and doing that busy work. That was really what it meant. And so it had this kind of grunt work, connotation to it.
Yeah, and I do want to say yes. And within the actual context of the time, it probably wasn't, meant to have any kind of sort of dismissive connotation. But I will say this is a film being played in modern times, and to modern ears, that does sound dehumanizing. So it can operate on kind of both levels of being what they would have actually been called, but also to us, it does ring as dehumanizing. So,
well, and you have these words like engineer that has such a very high kind of praise that comes with it. And I love Mary's comment where they asked, if she wanted to be an engineer, if she were a white man when she wanted to be an engineer, and she said, if I were a white man, I would alrety be an engineer, right?
Right.
So there is this idea that the big titles go to them. Yeah,
it's very prevalent in the society back then. Because again, we have to remember the time period, right? They were in the South. They were in Virginia, and at that time period, Virginia was a segregated state. Even though segregation, the federal courts had rendered that that segregation wasn't legal. A lot of the southern states still practice segregation, right? Because again, states' rights and all that. Again, this is a time period where they had to navigate. They had to be able to navigate the world that they lived in, and so even though they were able to achieve, there were boundaries set on those achievements, and so it was really good. It was really good for me to see, again, because I say this movie spoke to the little girl in me. It was really good to see that despite the boundaries, they were able to keep pushing those boundaries further and further while still maintaining some level of dignity and still maintaining it's not like today, because probably today most of them would have probably just like told them off and like, you know, you can't, you know, but I think they were able to still maintain some level of dignity and civility even while trying to push the boundaries and really making their value seen and known. And it was quite interesting to see how their counterparts felt so threatened to the point where they felt the need to have to say slight things in order to kind of keep them in their place. And so when you saw the interaction between Catherine and what was Parsons?
Sheldon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sheldon.
we'll just call him
Yeah.
Sheldon.
Yeah, call him Sheldon.
Racist Sheldon.
Yeah.
Which
When you saw the interactions between, like when he would look at her, it's like, oh my God, you could see he knows she's smart and she knows her numbers and how to do things, but in a sense he felt so threatened by her in that he felt
Absolutely.
the need to have to kind of put her in her place
Yeah.
in order for him to show his importance, right? But she was, if we're gonna be real, she was way smarter than he was.
She was, and she thought beyond just, right. She said, her boss said, I need someone to think around the numbers, right? Basically think outside of the box. And she did. She found this really old, sorry, I do want to say, Micah has a great comment that says, I was saying, shut up, Sheldon, while watching the movie today. But they needed someone to think outside the box, and she found this like ancient formula that figured it out. And I didn't see Sheldon coming up with any of that. I'm sorry, I don't know his character name. He's Sheldon.
Just to give Jim Parsons some respect, he plays Paul Stafford.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I kept saying
oh
Stafford.
Yeah, because she kept typing his name and then adding hers, and he would get onto her for that. No,
computers don't get credit.
God,
right?
That's where it's that comment that proves what we're talking about. The computer for these white men was seen as a menial grunt work kind of thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
right.
He would have given her author credit. So boom, use the textual evidence. We're done here.
I think not only did he try to demean her because of the fact that she was Black, but he also demeaned her because she was a woman. Because when he couldn't get her on her race, he fell back to her sex, right? Like, well, you can't go in there. And she's like, I need to get in there, da, 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 da. And then he goes, well, women don't go in there. Like, he kept moving. Like Mary said, she made a great statement in that she says, every time we try to get ahead, they move the goalpost, right? And that is something that is even prevalent for today. Every time, it sometimes feels like every time you get ahead, they move the goalpost and tell you, well, it's not just this that you have to do. You also have to do this. And then when you do it, then they're like, no, it's not just this that you have to do. You also have to do this. And then every time you keep meeting the requirement, it's never good enough. So you keep moving it. And then at some point, you either become very exacerbated, frustrated, and it's just like, you know what, I give up, or you have to go full on, Malcolm X and like, we got to make something happen here, right? And so that became their story. They had to make themselves valuable, and they each found a path to that, while still supporting each other. They each had to find a path, whether it was Catherine in making finding a pathway to be present, to be more effective, or whether it was Ms. Vaughn making sure that she understood the IBM computer to make her to make herself valuable, or whether it was Dorothy who went to night school so that she can meet the requirement in order to become an engineer. So
what I found really fascinating and like one of those moments where you just go, yeah, was when, because Dorothy starts off and when the other two are kind of moving up, she's like, of course I'm happy for you guys when,
Right.
you know, when, you know, one of us advances, it's good for all of us. Then she says, it's just not good for me. But she ends up in a lot of ways proving herself the most indispensable, just because of how much she learns and the fact that she's then in charge of training all these other people. I just love that, you know, that was her trajectory. And it's just like, you just want to stand up and cheer.
I know.
when she pulls that off, it's great.
It's like yeah. I think that everybody feels that way, right? It's a basic. It's one of those things as people, right? It's so good when you finally make it, right? Especially if there's something that you've been working so hard for, or if there's something that you really, really want. It's so good when you know. It's like a, it's so satisfying. It's like something gets lifted off of your shoulder. It's like you're floating on air, right? And seeing that moment for her, I think is something that all of us can relate to, right? It's not necessarily something that's just as a Black woman for her, but it's all of us as people. We all get a point in our life where we all like have that moment where it's like, fine, like when she gets her assignment and it says Dorothy Vaughn, supervisor, like it's that moment, right? That moment is just, oh, like you want to cry, you want to dance, you want to do all of those things. It's so elating. And when
then, she's leading all the girls over there, that is just like
such a triumphant moment.
Oh my god,
yes,
so wonderful. I love it.
I also think an important part of that too is not just achieving it, but also being recognized for it. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a picture that where they're recognized in church by their own community, and people at NASA aren't recognizing their work, but those around them and their community realize how instrumental they are to the advancement of the whole community, and
right.
to the using their intelligence to, you know, toward this common goal, which is not just about the advancement of technology, it's about beating the Ruskies, right? It's also about the Cold War. So there's a lot of political implications to this. And so it's really interesting that during this time of you know, segregation, but at the same time intense nationalism, it's very strange, you know, those two together. And I think this movie kind of shows how interesting that is. And I also like this not like, once again, this is all terrible, but as far as segregation, but I do enjoy the use of the word trouble, because that was used a lot back then. Don't be making trouble. So you know, so Dorothy walks by with her kids and said, we're not going to be in that trouble seeing a protest. Then she goes into a freaking library and wants to check out a book, and they call that trouble. I
wanted to just, like, I don't mean this seriously, don't want anybody, but it's like, you just wanted to that old woman, it's like, stop being terrible.
Let her check out a book about Fortran. Dang it! Like no one is hurting you. That's the thing. Also, with they show the water fountains, they show the bathrooms. Like, no one is hurting you. We saw that scene where Dorothy and Mrs. Mitchell are washing their hands next to each other, and Dorothy hands Mrs. Mitchell a towel to wipe her hands. Like, no one is being hurt by integration, and that's really the point. We're only being helped and all brought up and bettered as a society when we integrate. And that is, I think, a lot of what this movie is about. But I like how much it focuses on these three women and especially their friendship. I think that is a really beautiful part of the movie, because it's not just fight systemic racism, it's the worst. It's also look at how wonderful these women are. You know, for their families and to each other. And it's really beautiful the way that they help each other out, and that they realize that, hey, you know, they are all advancing in one way or the other, and they can help each other together.
But that speaks to, like, just being normal, regular people. That's
Absolutely.
what normal, regular people do. That's what normal, regular, good friends and best friends do. It's like, it speaks to, I am no different than you when I'm at home. Like, there's really very little. There's usually sometimes very little that separates all of us. Again, we all pretty much do probably basically the same things. Like, you know, whether we sit around a dinner table and talk or argue with each other, or whether we have like family reunions where you have that uncle and that aunt, right? And then grandma, you know, somebody's messing around with her false teeth. Like, we all have those moments. There's very few things that separate us. And I think I like that they showed that in the movie, because again, it speaks to the same way the three of them were just like, you know, having a good time, drinking their moonshine and making cookies or cake or whatever and dancing around. There was probably a Susie, a Colleen, and Anna Mae that were probably doing it in another house, right? Like, there's very few things that separate us. And I like the fact that it also humanizes, right? Because we're all human. There's nothing, I'm no lesser a human than you are. It's just that I just have a different tint of skin. That's it. That's really probably the major thing that separates me, but it really doesn't separate me that much.
I just want to make a comment real quick, because Amy, you were mentioning, you know, just, you know, this is a great picture, and, you know, it really illustrates, you know, their bond and friendship. I just, you know, this is sort of going off on a tangent, but I want to throw a shout out in general to on-set photographers, because this is a perfect example of, you know, catching a moment like this during filming. I think, you know, I think it's safe to say all of us, you know, watching this, you know, stream right now, are big Game of Thrones fans. So I think we can all respect the work that Helen Sloan, who was the on-set photographer for that show, put into those images. And yeah, just all these are beautifully taken and really capture some great moments throughout the film. Okay, that was my sort of tangent off.
I thought all of I love the photography. I love when they capture moments. It's like the moments that they're kind of like, what word am I looking for? It's like one of those moments where nobody's really paying attention. It's one of those things like,
candid moment.
Yes, thank you, candid. Very candid moments where it's like, here we are just doing our thing. It's not like we're not posing, we're not doing anything. And again, it just speaks to just everyday human interaction, human emotions, people being people. Nothing to really see here, but it's so good to see.
Yeah, and I love seeing Catherine's interactions with her three daughters, and meeting, you know, because she is a widow, meeting a man and falling in love. It's precious. And I also love how supportive that her mom is, because she's coming home late, and her mom is having to be full-time grandma with the kids. And I love how supportive they are. And we do get that one scene where Mary, I think the husband says something like, "You would have known if you are here." And then Mary kind of gives him the look like, "Do you want to be in the doghouse?" And I was like,
right.
Can relate. Like, I've had to give my partner a couple looks like that before. You know, there are these times where it's like, wait a second, I'm doing something that's important to me and important to the country. So what are you talking, you know? And it also, I think,
showed the overlooked. That can't be overlooked, that what they were doing was actually, it wasn't, even though this was their story, but the bigger picture of it is this was something we were actually in a race with the Russians to get into space.
Yeah.
And these women played a huge part of that. And again, and I'm sure if it wasn't for this movie, a lot of us would have never known that. We would have never known that these women and how these women played a role in that.
And I think also there's the assumption of having it all. You need, if you have a job, you also need to still have these domestic responsibilities.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, that's true for all women, but especially women of color. And so I think that was really interesting to see whenever Catherine said, I'm having to be mom and dad, right,
Yes.
to her kids. That means I have to work and also take care of you. And then, like I said, we had Mary, where her husband is being a little bit of a butthole, kind of
Yes.
being like, well, you aren't here. And it's like, hold up, you know.
So that also speaks to another, you know, time. It's a time period, right? The same things that were happening in white households was also happening. Again, that's what I mean, that we were not really all that different. Like, there were sexist Black husbands who felt that their wives should have been home taking care of the kids while they were out working, right? It just so happened, especially when we came into the 60s, you had more, you know, after the, you know, from the advent of the Second World War, when all the men were out fighting and a lot of the women had to go into the workforce. When a lot of these, when a lot of the men came back from the war and they went to school and they went and got these jobs, a lot of women still stayed in the workforce, right? And so you started to have a lot of two working adults in the home. You didn't really have like a homemaker and a breadwinner. It became less and less, but you still had a huge part of the population that still practiced that, you know, that family dynamic where you had the husband and the father who was the breadwinner, and then the mother and the wife who was the homemaker and the nurturer and taking care of home and taking care of the children. Like, everybody had their stereotypical male and female roles.
Yeah, and I will say that moment when, you know, when Jim is, you know, first trying to, you know, do his thing, and he screws up pretty quickly, and I'm like, no, dude.
Women.
No, dude,
It's like,
don't.
open your mouth
no.
and insert foot. Open your, and he just kept putting his foot like deeper and deeper into his mouth. I was
just
like,
digging that hole.
Like, dude. But he got it together. He got it together.
But yeah, and I will say, to his credit, there's a guy who knows the second he's screwed up.
Oh, that face. I've seen that face before.
And you know what? He tried to come back and made it even worse.
Yeah. You gotta stop and just, you know, and it's funny. Johnny, also, I love how Catherine, whenever he said, I believe I owe you an apology, and she goes, well, was that it?
It's like, yeah, a lot of people like to say, I owe you an apology, just not the actual apology.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is that like, don't tell me you owe me an apology, just apologize. So telling me you owe it, it's like, what, are you going to pay it to me now, or are you going to pay it to me later? Like, how does that work?
So where is it? Yeah.
I do love what comes right before that, though, when it's, you know, the three of them are standing there, and it's especially, you know, I think it was Laura who mentioned earlier in the chat that Mary has like all the best one-liners.
She does.
And then Dorothy's like, you know, or one of them is like, it's Sunday.
But again, that's what being with good friends. I love that they showed the dynamics of their friendship with each other, right? Because it wasn't all, I'm trying to, you know, fight the challenges of being Black in the South. They actually showed them in their own human moments and being friends. It wasn't all doom and gloom. They did have some really true, good, authentic friendship and good moments with family. You saw them, you know, you saw conflict within a marriage. You saw, you know what I mean? You saw them interact with their children. You saw them interact with each other. Like, there's a whole family dynamic that is happening, and I'm so happy that the movie found a way to weave that into these women's story, and then just make it all about it's me against the world, right? There's a whole other, they are multi-dimensional human beings, and I'm glad that they were able to fit all of that into their story.
Yeah, they didn't reduce their lives to just oppression, and that's
Correct.
what I liked about
Correct.
this.
That's another great one.
yeah.
It's equal rights. I have the right to see fine in every color.
Yes.
And that guy
I'm a huge proponent of that too. Like, I like to see the whole entire rainbow, the whole enchilada. I like to see all of the good and the bad in all of the rainbow. Like, don't just relegate me to just one particular color. I want to see all the colors. So yeah, I love that.
You deserve all the beautiful people in the world.
Thank you.
That was a really great line, and it also kind of showed. I think it really first of all, it showed her sassiness, which was also nice, but it also showed she was recognizing that, you know, she doesn't necessarily need to just accept these kinds of axioms.
Yeah.
And it was really great of Glenn, the person who played the astronaut. Was it Stephen Glenn? Whatever.
John Glenn.
John Glenn.
It was a while when I saw that movie. Sorry. The way that he purposely came over to take the time to meet them, right? Even though he was,
and notice his handlers were like, "Oh, there's no time," but it just took like, you know, a minute to say hi to them.
Like, I just want to go say hi.
Yeah.
Because I think also that speaks to you. I appreciated that because you notice that there's a whole team of people that are trying to make sure that you are successful in your mission. And I think that also speaks to leadership, right? That is true leadership, in that you recognize the entire team, not just a part of the team, even the person who you think whose job is not that important. They still play a part in making sure that you are successful. And it was really good to see that.
Yeah, and Guilty Undertaker says that the film took many liberties with actual history, but John Glenn asking for Katherine Johnson specifically to check the math before his flight was 100% true. Now, there was a bit more time before, you know, in actuality.
Right.
It wasn't like right before the flight.
Drama, poetic license.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't expect that with the movie.
Right,
They're gonna, you know, compress the time to make it more dramatic. But I really did love that moment. And
what was good about that moment is that White Boy had to run over to West Campus to get her. Yeah. Right? That was the best part. Is she was having to run back and forth in her heels, right?
Can we talk about the dress code, right? So they were expected to have a dress code, right? They had to wear their dresses or their skirts below the knees. They had to have heels on, and they were only allowed to wear pearls. They weren't allowed to wear any other jewelry other than pearls. But most of them couldn't even afford pearls, right? But they had, and so when she went from the west campus to go all the way to the east campus, again, this is where I had a bit of a I kind of had a bit of a thing against Kevin Costner, in that, you know, he should have made sure that she had everything that, you know, she needed, being the only colored person that was working in the East Campus inside of that room, as also being a female. The fact that she had to run all the way over to the West Campus just to use the restroom, and everybody in that office knew. They knew, right? And so by the time she blows up to her boss, it's like, so that's where you've been going this whole time? Like, you didn't bother to mention it like before, but today, after all of the other times you noticed that she'd been missing for long periods of time, you never made it a point to ask her about it until that very moment, because you probably could have resolved it or addressed it a lot earlier. So that was like a nitpicky moment for me, because I was like, man, I've had a boss like that.
And I think it's important
Yeah.
to note that Kevin Costner's character did not actually exist in real life.
Yes.
That's more of an amalgamation, probably, of some different characters.
Yes.
And it really, that whole sort of plot point does exist to give her big moment of unleashing,
Right.
which we
Yeah.
want for, you know, watching a character in a film.
We wanted for her character too,
yeah.
especially her. But I also, what I like about the running back and forth, she brings her work. She does not waste
Yes.
a minute. The only moment she's wasting is the
Yeah.
actual running time there and back. While she is peeing, she is also working on the numbers. I mean, that's how dedicated she is. And so when she blows up at him and says, you know, I work night and day like a dog, she really does, and we see that happen. And I love her point about she's surviving off of coffee in a pot that was made just for her. They literally printed a label and put it on and she had to make it herself too. So she had to take the time to go get the water, which, I hope there was a water fountain that wasn't. There's probably also, she'd have to go to the West Campus to get water too. So they were really wasting her time. And whenever they have that scene where he takes a crowbar to the restroom sign and says, pee wherever, that was really good because, but it did kind of show that he was a little bit of a tough boss too, when he was like, preferably closer to your desk, where it's like, okay, dude,
Right.
like she's not getting the job done. Come on. I mean,
and they said, I read somewhere where they said that when he made the line where in NASA we all pee the same color. That it became like kind of like a motto in NASA for quite some time. That they actually did say that in real life in NASA, that saying did actually exist or does still exist. I can't remember where I read that, but they did say that in NASA we all pee the same color.
I love these scenes where she just does circles around them with math. And it's like all white dudes and that one white lady being like, dang.
Fun fact, I watch math videos. I love watching math videos. And I know that's a very random and
it's
really
that's your random Manaro fact of the day.
It's so satisfying seeing every time Sheldon realizes he's being outsmarted by her. It's like the look on his face. It's like, this mixture of like, he's angry about it. He's sort of pissed off, and he's sort of humiliated, and at the same time,
and a little bit of begrudging respect
through all of these emotions.
Yeah,
it's a mixture of all that stuff, and it's just great, very satisfying.
Would you like to do the
watching math?
Soon,
I love
John?
watching math.
Let's just save it for the end. We're
cool.
Yeah, but yeah, it's sorry. Now you know what it is? It's all this holdover from stuff from my love of seeing people get the better of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. It like carries over to this.
It does, especially because I hated the way that he treated Amy Farrah Fowler, another Amy who was awesome and smart, and the way that he would control her. I hated that so much. So seeing him just getting his ass handed to him,
he's got a lot of stuff coming. So.
Yes, he does.
Can we take a moment to really appreciate all of the actors in this movie?
Now I remembered what I was going to say, which was that, and everybody knows by now, I have lots of grievances with the Oscars. So the fact that
I don't watch those anymore.
It's fine. I like to complain about them. I don't actually watch the show anymore. But Octavia Spencer was nominated for this for Best Supporting Actress, but it's like, how could you nominate her and not nominate the other two? It's, it's just.
I think it was just easy for them, right? Because Octavia Spencer, she had already played in like Oscar-winning films like The Help.
Yeah.
I think she also played in. There was another movie that she played in that was Oscar nominated. I think it was right. Was it before The Help or after The Help? I'm trying to. I can see it, but I can't say the name of the movie.
Well, it's like she was even nominated for The Shape of Water. So it doesn't show you like they're nominating her left and right.
I think this is my problem with the Oscars, if I could have a sidebar for a moment. Like, this is my
please do.
problem. Like, they find an actor, and in order for them to keep checking the box, they'll just keep gravitating to that one actor. Like, there aren't like all of these other actors that are doing great work, right? Like, why is it that you're just picking on that one just so that you can check the box? Well, we're being diverse. Like, please stop it. That's not to take away anything from Octavia Spencer. Like, to me,
because she's great.
I think
she's phenomenal.
To me, her role in The Help was like one of her most standout roles in her acting career. And that's not to take away her role in this movie at all, in Hidden Figures. That's not to take away from that. But my thing is, to me, if you want to ask me, I think Janelle Monae was like the standout character in this movie, to me. And that's not taking away anything from Taraji P. Henson or Octavia Spencer. But that's just me, as you know, as a person who's viewing the movie. Anybody can probably say something different. And so I don't like that whenever it's time for them to nominate someone, she just so happened to be a person that played in a movie. And so now you're just going to gravitate to her because you want to be able to check that box. It's like they did the same thing with Denzel. It's like they did the same thing with Halle Berry. It's like, I need you guys to stop doing that. I need you to really... And
to a certain degree, it exists even outside of, when you're talking about, the Oscars trying to be diverse, because they always gravitate towards actors they like. We saw the same thing time after time with the Emmys, where they were constantly giving awards to Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones and nobody else. So it's just a thing that's... those awards.
Why is it? Because he's a dwarf? Like, come on, it's okay. I'm sure he would be okay not winning this year. You don't have to appease to all the little people. I don't know what the right term is. Oh, I hope I wasn't being offensive by calling him a dwarf. But is it because he's a little person? I don't know what the right term is. Is that because you want to appeal to people that also suffer that, and so you don't want to like step on anybody's toes, so you want to keep giving him the Oscar when there are other actors on the Game of Thrones that did probably just as, like, to me, I could have did without Peter Dinklage in season 5, but
I just want to say, Guilty Undertaker, Alfie Allen actually was nominated for the final season of Game of Thrones, so he did. That's actually
nasty.
He
was
got
great
him
throughout the whole thing.
He got, well, yeah, but it took them a while to warm up to other actors. So I'm just glad he got in at all.
It was so. I was glad that I finally quickly warmed up to Alfie Allen, because Lily Allen, his sister, who's a singer, that was my first exposure to him, and she had that song called Alfie about him like just playing video games and smoking weed in his room. And so like when I heard he was going to be Theon, I was thinking, let's see how this goes. And then I was pleasantly surprised.
I thought he was
he was really
Theon.
good.
I think he did.
Yeah, he was really good.
He was one of, I had never seen, most of these people were first time, like this was their first major role, their first role ever. I think they did great. I think they did absolutely great. Whether you love the character or not, I think they did great with respect to with the acting.
Yeah, the show took a divergence for me with liking Theon versus the book, where I just hate him.
I don't blame the actors. I blame
absolutely. But I'm saying that there's that moment in this is not a Game of Thrones stream. Sorry, everybody. But
and
there's
welcome to our Game of Thrones stream, everyone.
There's that moment in season 2 when he starts to write that letter to Rob.
Yeah,
and that's when I knew they had me hooked into that character and Alfie's performance, because I was like, just send the letter, don't burn it. Okay, now we'll get back on track.
Right.
Hidden Figure.
Hidden Figure. But yeah, I will say, but we were talking about the Oscars, and it's like the reason why I brought that up is because you see Taraji P. Henson in that moment where she blows up, and as someone who grew up watching the Oscars, I'm like, that is an Oscar
That's
clip
an Oscar.
if I ever saw one. So yeah, to my mind, it really sucks that she didn't get a nomination, but But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter as time moves on. She's phenomenal, and what's sorry, I don't Janelle Monae, is
Yes.
that her name? Yeah, she was absolutely phenomenal, and just like I said, that courtroom scene, I love the way
Yes.
she totally plays the judge, and
Yes.
and then manipulates him to to like he's like So yeah,
I also like the scene in the meeting that the briefing that she kind of
Yes.
was not allowed in, and finally, and I love where they're like, there's no protocol for women being in the meeting. Like, let them sit in the meeting. You don't have to change anything about the meeting to have a woman sit in on it. But the way that she then kind of goes up to the board and that I like this scene because she says so much without saying hardly anything.
Right.
Her body language and everything really was so good in this scene. She's really kind of feels out of place, but then when she has that chalk in her hand and she goes up to the chalkboard, she's in her element.
Well, because like cinematically, that's a callback to the beginning of the film,
right?
Where they show her as a little girl, writing out all the stuff on the chalkboard. So, and I love we were talking earlier about the actor who plays John Glenn. I love his reactions during this scene of just like he's totally all in on her.
All of them were like odd. Yeah. Like the moment that she grabbed that chalk. I love how they panned in on the handoff of the chalk. It's kind of like how when you're running a race and you hand off a baton. That's probably a very cheesy analogy, but that's what it felt like. Like he was passing her the baton and say, okay, go finish this race. And so when she gets the baton and she takes off, the minute that chalk touches that board, she is in her element, in her own world. Kind of like what was that again, I'm having a sidebar because this is what it reminded me of. The character that Benedict Cumberbatch played. He played a young. He played this guy that invented or came up with coding.
Alan Turing.
Yeah, Alan Turing.
Right. Thank you. It's kind of like that moment. Right, where he gets into this mode, and that's prevalent with a lot of geniuses, right? Like they get into this, it's almost trance-like for them, right? When they get into this element, and then they just are in their own world, and then they just it's kind of like you have to keep up with them, and that's what it looked like from the audience, from that scene in the boardroom. All of these men were like they were captivated, and it's like she didn't even realize they were there. She was just out there writing the equations, and then when she's done, she like composes herself, and she's like, and she's done it, and seen, and it was, and they're all like, huh?
Oh wow.
I do just want to take a moment to say, as Stephen's saying, she doesn't play him or manipulate him. She convinces him with a well-spoken and deliberate
meaning
argument.
married to the judge, correct?
Yes. I completely agree. Probably a poor choice of words on my part. What I mean is basically he's essentially putty in her hands. She's able to convince him.
A little bit of manipulation. Like she did stroke his ego, so there's a little bit of manipulation.
Yeah, so that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, and that normally has a negative connotation, but in this case, when the system's against you, you have to manipulate it in order to get ahead.
Exactly.
So, Manaro, actually, one thing I was going to ask you about this movie is I didn't really sense any white savior characters. Do you agree?
No, there wasn't. And
there is some criticism about this movie that the scene where Kevin Costner comes and tears down the bathroom sign, that feeds into a
No,
white savior trope. What do you guys
no,
think
it
about that?
doesn't. See, because the white savior trope, you mostly see a lot of white savior tropes, mostly probably in slave movies. You'll probably you see that a lot, or in some historical movies, some action movies, some other movies, some other fictional movies, or some timepieces that deal with 15th or 16th or 17th or 18th century timepieces, or you'll probably see that. But I don't see what Kevin Costner did as a white savior moment, because it wasn't like he did that more so out of practicality on his part, even though it ended up being something that the women benefited from. Or I should say the Black women benefit, even though they actually benefited from his action. He did it more so out of practicality, because it wasn't practical for him to have his computer running, having to go all the way across campus so that she could use the bathroom. It wasn't practical. He needed her there, and so as a means of removing an obstacle, he took that sign down. So to me, it wasn't necessarily a white savior, because there wasn't going to be anybody else that was going to be able to do that. Quite honestly, he was the only one that had the authority to be able to do that. And so I don't see that at least to me, it didn't, unless somebody can give me a differing argument as to why they feel that scene was a white savior moment. I didn't view it that way. I just viewed it as somebody who was trying to do something. It ended up being the right thing, but it was more for practicality.
And as you were saying earlier, he could very well have done and noticed and done something about this earlier. So,
right,
it's not, so really it's kind of like, okay, you eventually took notice.
Yeah. I mean, because it was something, he did it practically, because again, it didn't work for it. It wasn't going to help him out. He needed her there, and her having to be gone 40 minutes out of the day, 3 or 4 times a day. That's time he couldn't afford to lose her at her desk. And so it was more practical for him to just remove that obstacle. And at the same time, it ended up being a good thing, and it benefited more than just her. It benefited all of the women that worked probably in the East Campus. So yeah, that wasn't a white savior moment to me. White savior, or there might be some blurring of the lines or misunderstanding about what the white savior trope is like. And for those who probably don't understand what that means, it's when whenever you have a Black person who's having an issue, the only way that they can resolve it is if a white person helps them to resolve it, when they probably could have just resolved it themselves, but they had to have a white person do it. In this instance, there was nobody else to do it. It wasn't like they were going to be able to do it anyway. Even if they wanted to, they didn't have the power to do that. So it wasn't. And then again, I say, and I'll say it again, I don't think he really did it for true altruistic reasons.
Yeah.
It was more practical for him to have her not gone away from her desk for half the day. It was causing
an inconvenience for him, and it was slowing down work. So
exactly. So it wasn't like he did it like, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and be a hero. That's not why he did. It wasn't really a hero moment. It was I'm just gonna take this down. Listen, we got a job to do, and this is really keeping us from doing our job. So I'm just gonna, since I can make it happen, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, his character was noticeably like not even trying to be a hero at any point throughout this movie. He's singularly focused on his work and his job. It's like whatever it takes to achieve that goal. So
he had total tunnel vision. His main goal was getting these guys into space. That was his singular focus, and however he wanted to get there, that's how he was going to get there. It didn't matter. It wasn't until towards the end where he had the ability to do something, where he shrunk and said, well, it's out of my hands. That's when we finally get to a moment in the movie where he actually has to have a true interaction with Catherine, where he has the power to do something, or he can do something, but he kind of like shrinks behind, well, it's not me, if I could, I would, but how these things go.
Which, and the very fact that at the end of the film it says that she goes on to work on, like Apollo 11 and all that stuff.
Right.
Like, so apparently you could do something about it.
All you have to do is tell your superiors, I need this worker. We can't do it without them. They'll believe it. They'll be like, cool. We'll keep them. Yeah. That's the thing, is also when you make that excuse, it's you and every other person that's also making that excuse. So no one ever does anything, so it stays the same. If more people made the decision that they weren't going to let it be that way, then it would change.
Again, and that's also, where I say that this was a way of kind of like trying to absolve yourself of the guilt that you may feel, that very darn well that you could do something, but you don't, you just don't want to, you know what I mean? Like ruffle any feathers or rock the boat in any way, even though because she told him, like, who has the authority to do that? She goes, you do. You just have to act like it.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the pearl moment when she was given the pearls? Because if I remember right, the woman that gave it to her said that it was the boss's idea, right?
Right.
Did I remember that right?
Yeah. I don't know. I felt that moment was.
Then we see her wear them later.
They either could have done that scene better to me, or they could have just left it out.
That was probably the only scene that to me didn't feel empowering. It felt a little patronizing.
Very.
That's kind of
you
how
just
it came
fired me, and then you're giving me pearls. Like,
yeah, the timing was definitely not good. That's
why I said they either could have done it different. It would have probably meant more if he had presented them to her instead of the woman down in the pit presenting them to her.
It felt like a guilt gift, which doesn't...
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then again,
it also felt kind of tone deaf from him. It's like.
But then I don't suspect that he was a guy for the time period. He was being your typical. You know
what it felt like? It felt like Ned getting a doll for Sansa.
Right.
Kelly has a really great comment. How did you know about this classified redacted information? Oh, I held it up to the light. Like the most obvious thing ever doesn't occur to people who hardly encounter obstacles in their lives, right? It's like everything has always been, right in front of them and given to them. They've always been given full data. They've never had to scrap for it,
And I love the way that the guy in the end, when he's walking out the office, holds it up to the light, like,
oh, I guess I know this.
It's like,
and he's like, what's a good idea? Darker ink.
Yeah.
He's like, are you a Russian spy? She's like, I'm not Russian.
Yeah. And then I love when he goes, this interrogation is over. I love that line too. Like, and that's also during the Red Scare that there, I felt like the boss felt like, okay, I'll go through the motions, but he saw it as defeating Russia on a national level and not this this kind of paranoia that was going on at the time. There were a lot of actually shout outs to kind of that time too. The kids asked about they had to do drills under their desk. My mom had to do that in school, where you get under your desk and, which probably wouldn't help that much, but these drills and, she has to comfort them. And those are really interesting scenes that really put the movie in its time.
I do. Like I said, I appreciated a lot of the that they kind of tried to keep with the time under which this story, these events, I should say, actually took place. And I think you had put a comment up there just shows how simple, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, don't take it in a bad way, but guys are very simple. It's like, oh, I knew she wanted pearls. This will make her happy. I'll give her pearls. Like, this was like a very basic and simplistic way of saying, I know you like this, so I'll give it to you. Like, I think most guys are kind of like that. Like, if you mention something that you like or that you want, and they know they're in trouble, what they'll do is they'll go and get you that thing as a way of trying to make you feel better and absolving themselves of any guilt, and kind of like smoothing things over. Okay, if I give you this, you can't be mad at me anymore. And I'll be like, yes, I'll take this. And then I'll still be mad at you. And then I'll decide when I'll stop. Thank you very much. But to
me, it also represented the dress code, which seemed very oppressive to me,
Well,
so it was also that.
I have to say, well, I guess I didn't, it could be in a way, but I guess because for me being in the military, we had a dress code, and the only jewelry, we were only allowed to wear like certain jewelry, and each branch of the service, they're different. Like for the Navy, enlisted had to wear brushed silver. We could wear brushed silver earrings, right? And the officers and senior enlisted could wear gold brush earrings. And you were allowed to only have one ring per finger unless you were on a ship. You weren't allowed to have any jewelry at all. Or if you were on a work site, you weren't allowed to have any jewelry at all. Even if you had a wedding ring, they ask you to remove it and put it. You could either put it on your dog tags or secure it somewhere where you wouldn't lose it, so that your rings couldn't get caught on any machinery. And so I know back then there was a lot of dress codes, and I think it was, but the dress codes weren't specifically, but to be fair, the dress codes weren't specifically only to the Black women. All of the women had to adhere to those dress codes. It's just that the Black women couldn't afford the pearls and the white women could. And so that's the stark difference, right? And the fact that she had to have heels and had to run across the campus just to go use the bathroom and then run back, I know her feet had to be like.
Oh, and also when sorry, I don't have everybody's names memorized. When Mary gets her heel stuck,
right?
Great, and it's like it's seconds away from being turned on. It's like you don't want to die over.
Yeah, no shoe is worthless. You're like, yeah. Also, I'm glad that you mentioned that scene, because her kind of engineering team, her boss has that line, when she says, if I were a white man, I would be an engineer. There was a line before that about the impossible, and he mentions that he's Jewish, and if he could be there, that there is, to quote my favorite Cinderella movie, impossible things are happening every day. So there's this idea of it's the early 60s, things are starting to change, but at the same time, she's realistic about how slow they are changing.
But I'm glad that he made that comment to her, because that was probably the push that she needed to not to just accept her circumstance, and that she could actually do something about it, because he said it to her, but she was also complaining to her friends about it. And so I think it's one thing when sometimes it's not necessarily the message, it's the messenger, right? Because let's say if your mom tells you you're beautiful, it's your mom. You're like, yeah, mom, I'm beautiful. But if the person that you really have a crush on and you really, really like comes to you and says, I think you're beautiful, you're going to take that message a lot different than if your mom tells you you're beautiful. Because your mom is your mom. You expect her to tell you you're beautiful. I don't think of any mom that's going to go around telling their kid that they're ugly, whether they are or not. I don't even know why I said that. But but if your crush tells you you're beautiful or you're handsome, that's way different. So it's the messenger, right? Him as a white man telling her, listen, I'm a white guy, I'm Jewish. There's no reason and I'm here in America and I'm an engineer. So that's a miracle in of itself. Because he's his parents were were survivors of Nazi imprisonment camps. And so to him, that was an obstacle that he could overcome. Maybe that might have been maybe his ignorance might have played into that, in that, you know, he probably couldn't really grasp the how segregated blacks and whites are. But to him, it was simple enough for him to say, listen, if I could overcome that and be an engineer, why can't you?
I will say, though, if you don't have an accent and your name isn't obvious, a Jewish person can pass as white, and a person of color can never pass as that. So there is a little bit, I think, of a difference there. But he does have a good point, in that, I mean, he obviously, with his accent, you can tell he's
and
you know, not a quote unquote a white American.
And I think like the sentiment that he's sharing is a good one. And I think that she respects him enough that she takes it as the words of encouragement. That
it's coming from a good place, and I get that. And he also, I like how he pushes her, because she is so smart, and he sees that. And I think that another great thing about that is that even though, you know, their bosses might encourage them one way or the other, it's these women that are really doing the work. You know, we see them putting in the hours and putting in the energy for it. So it's, you know, it's not just because they came, quote unquote, they came recommended or anything. They're having to actually go out there and do it. Even if they have this, you know, the support of their boss, they're earning all of this themselves. Yeah.
So I think I like that they showed that moment in that she knew it's something that she wanted, but she felt her circumstance wouldn't have allowed for her to be able to achieve it. And I think him saying that to her, along with her friends encouraging her to tell her, listen, you need to stop complaining and do something about it. I think that kind of support system was what she needed in order for her to overcome the obstacle that was placed in front of her by Mrs. Mitchell, to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And even despite her, and that's also even despite her husband not being supportive about it at first.
And also, I think he's caring a lot, you know, in terms of the way that he views, and it's not just about, I mean, it's certainly part of it is that she's a woman, and, you know,
right.
You know, but the fact that he sees the struggles that, you know, Black people are just going through, and he doesn't see it as, you know, as simple as you can progress through your job just through traditional means. You have to really, you know, it has to be fought for, and it has to be won, and they do go and you know, in that way fight for, you know, for their, you know, jobs and their achievements, and I like that it comes back around to where he admits, you know, that he was wrong to doubt her. I really did love that scene.
Yeah, and he bought her a mechanical pencil. That was so sweet. Yeah. That was so sweet. Another thing that I liked about this movie is that it didn't take away. None of the whole story didn't take away from these women. Like, they each in their own right. The story was able to be told about them in each of their own right. And even though this movie is not what we would consider a very long movie in and of itself. It wasn't really that long of a movie, but they still were able to tell the story where you were able to, identify with each of the characters. You got to know each of the characters. You got to know them separately, and you got to know them as a group. And so I think it was really well done. Whether, you know, there were some historical liberties taken, I think the essence of each of these women's stories and achievements and obstacles and challenges was told. I thought it was well told.
Yeah, it's really kind of remarkable that this is a story of these women, each on their kind of separate, unique paths within NASA, and yet we do get a sense of them as this group of friends. But it's not like there's some climactic scene where they all come together and they're working, you know, in sort of the same space. They, you know, a climax of the story is told with them, you know, in different areas of NASA doing different things. And I think that's really rather neat that they were able to pull that off in a way that's dramatically satisfying.
I will say though, all three of their jobs are shown in John Glenn's flight, right? You had Mary
Yeah.
looking at the mechanical part of it, right?
Hmm.
And then of course you had Dorothy with the like the IBM machine calculations part of it, right? And then you had Catherine with the math. Yeah, finally get all of their names toward the end of the street. Yes. So all three of the fruits of all three of their labor is shown in that final flight, and it is sad that it wasn't wholly successful and that they didn't do the full 7 orbits around the Earth that they wanted to, so that they could be just like the Russians. But they did get a dude into space and bring him down safely. Like that did happen. So, and you know, the way that they had to react to something going wrong, they can learn a lot from that. You learn from things that didn't go right, more than things going correct. So I think that that's also important.
I'm sorry, I just have to say, Guilty Undertaker, I find it really cute that you think 2 hours is a long.
I know. I'm like, 2
movie.
hours is nothing nowadays. Like,
I'm like, that goes by just like that. That's nothing. But it's like I spent, you know, most of the 2000s obsessing. Okay, who am I kidding? I'm still obsessing over them. Obsessing over basically 3.5 to 4 hour, you know, epics. Called The Lord of the Rings. You may have heard of them. So
yes,
it's
and I
so
have
it's like,
all of the extended. I got all the extended versions because don't give me none of the. I want to see all of the extensions.
yeah. So yeah, 2 hours to me is like it's
that's short.
Blink of an eye. But yeah, we're coming down to the last 10 minutes. Was there anything we didn't cover about the movie that you guys want to mention? I'll just say, like, I'm so happy to have finally seen this movie. I thought it was utterly fantastic and really entertaining. Like it's, you know, sort of a history lesson, but it's, you know, it's one of those crowd pleasing types of movies. I kind of regret that I didn't see it in the theater, because you just imagine the audience reactions to a lot of moments. So,
Yeah,
especially Mary's one-liners, you know, in the theater, I would have been like, "Oh yeah, girl."
Yes. The one thing I appreciate, the one thing I could say about this movie, I would really love to see young girls get back into the sciences, right? Like, there was an era, and I know for me specifically, when I growing up, where math and sciences were fun and something that was highly encouraged, and where you had a lot of women pursue that field. You don't see that too much. I mean, at least now I don't see that much anymore, where you see a lot of young women that pursue the fields of science and engineering anymore. And so I would love to see a callback to that, at least to me. Like I say, I watch math videos, so you can take that for what that's worth. Like I watch people do equations because I get a kick out of it. I happen to love math, and I'm always watching how, Earth videos, how the Earth was made videos. I can like binge watch that all day long, and how things are made. That was one of the things that I used to love watching on the Science Channel. I think it was the Science Channel. So I would really like to see that, a callback to where women are kind of encouraged to enter the science and the mathematics, because I think, and I see that more so in my nieces, like there's something where it seems where if you like math, or if you like science, that it's something that you're teased in. And well, I can say more so probably that's more probably, that might be environmental, where where these young girls are are discouraged because of peer pressure, not necessarily because it's not something that they can't do, but they're not encouraged to do it. And I would like to see I say that more so for young girls, because men and boys are encouraged to do those types of things, like pursue those engineering and aerodynamics, doctor, lawyer, and all those things, but more specifically in the sciences. They're encouraged to do those things, and you don't see too many girls are encouraged to do that. And this movie in particular, even though I know it's a story about Black women, I expand that under the umbrella of all women. I would love to see more women or more girls pushed into doing those sciences, because I think there's a lot of talent that is untapped, and sometimes it's because of gender roles that are placed on. Yes, even now today, gender roles are being enforced in so many different subtle ways on us, on children, and I'd like to see that kind of change in a way. And this movie kind of like takes me back to a time where that wasn't the case, where you had everybody were actually pushed to excellence, and you don't see that too much. Maybe it's probably because it could be also because of the cost of education. Who knows?
I also would like, on the other side, then to see practical homemaking skills encouraged for boys. My partner doesn't know how to boil water, so I'll just leave that there. He is helpless. Yeah, when I'm like cutting tomatoes, he just stares like I'm doing black magic. So yeah, I was making bruschetta mix today, and he was like, "What's in that?" Like, he had eaten bruschetta his whole life and never knew that it was tomato, basil, and garlic. Like, very simple, with some olive oil and some balsamic. Like,
even though you don't have him confirmed yet, I know that we're intending to have him on for when we do The Little Mermaid.
We will not have to convince him to talk about The Little Mermaid.
Which we're also going to have Kate on for, and we're all just going to launch into him over this. It's going to be an intervention.
That is hilarious. I was having a conversation with my sister real quickly. I think, back when I was in school, we did have home economics. I'm dating myself. Okay. And I'm okay with dating myself. Back in when I was still in high school,
I thought you meant literally dating yourself.
Yeah,
and I was like, what an empowering thing to say. You're like single, but dating yourself.
I was going to say, this is not a ginger ale chat, Manaro.
You'd be amazed.
I'm sorry, Manaro, go ahead.
You'd be amazed how quickly things turned very ginger ale with me around. But I had home economics class. Like, we had practical home ec. Like, we learned about cooking, we learned about managing a checkbook and finance. But how I started off in high school is not how my high school ended, because by the time I ended high school, a lot of those classes were taken away. We know they didn't have home ec wasn't part of the high school curriculum anymore by the time I graduated from high school. And so but I think it would do very well that if they could integrate some sort of, even though it's not home, they could like revamp what home economics looks like teaching kids about personal finance and personal responsibility, how to manage, a home, or how to manage, being in an apartment with respect to being able to pay my rent, being able to pay my bills, being able to manage a checkbook, being able to manage savings, understanding about investing,
financial
understanding about
classes,
about retirement class, how to invest for retirement. All of those things, those things should be part of the new home ec in class. Like, you don't really have to teach me how to cook, but you can teach me about how to be a self-sustaining adult. And they shouldn't say, you know what?
Yeah,
That's
I think it's about practical skills. Yeah,
that's something that your parents to teach you. A lot of parents don't have that skill to teach. And so I think those types of things should be introduced, in early education, maybe in middle school or
I had home
even.
economics in 6th grade, and I'm a millennial, so it's not that it's not there. But it was mostly cooking and sewing and such. But I like your idea, Manaro, too, about this idea of skills are skills, and they should no longer be gendered, and they shouldn't have been gendered in the first place. You need to be able to have basic skills in your life, no matter if you're a man, woman, trans, non-binary individuals. Like, that's.
Can I just say that, and this will probably surprise nobody, that I was probably one of the only boys taking my home ec class who actually loved the cooking part of it.
And I'm sure you weren't there just to pick up chicks like the boys that were in my home ec class, John.
Yeah, it's like
my apron, I still have it. It is terribly sewn. I was so bad at the sewing, but I was good at the cooking. So.
Well, because I remember I got really excited because for like our final, week or whatever, they let us, like cook whatever we wanted. So I like brought in like noodles and tomato sauce and ground beef, and I was making spaghetti and going all out, and just I had a really great time with that. So
I guess
such a good time.
I guess the home ec thing must be like, I guess based on where you live, because I'm from Brooklyn. I went to high school in the in the city, and like I said, when I went to high school in the early to mid 80s, and back then, back when I was going to high school, when I started high school, they had it. By the time I ended high school, it wasn't part of the curriculum anymore. But they did introduce entrepreneurship by the time I graduated from high school, where they were teaching students about being business owners. The bad thing about that is they didn't teach you about anything else. They didn't teach you about managing, your checkbooks, overhead.
Yeah, the more common thing that someone would come across.
The finance part, like they didn't teach us about finances. And again, that's why I think it would be healthy for a revamp or they need to add in home X about personal finance and personal management of finances. I don't think that it should be automatically assumed that your parents will teach you that, because especially for a lot of us, like my grandmother didn't teach me anything about personal finance. Her sense of personal finance was taking her money, putting it in a sock and putting it in her bottom drawer. She didn't trust banks. Like that was the extent of personal finance with me and my grandmother. Okay. Like she didn't put it in the mattress, but she put it in an old sock that she had and put her money. And whenever she needed anything, she would go to the bottom drawer and grab her sock and, pull out a 20 or a 5. So, I had to learn about personal finance when I joined the military. So, I think that's something that they might want to consider. But again, not to stray away from it, I think for me, this film kind of like, I think that it was like, there's a sense of loss of some of the potential that we have that we are not encouraging anymore. To me, it just seems more gender bias, why it's not being encouraged anymore, more so than it is racial bias. But back then, I mean, certainly there was a lot of racial bias, but these types of professions and were still encouraged, because those are the things that help us to advance as a society. And when you don't tap into or encourage the younger generation to get into those fields, you leave gaps, right? You leave gaps, and then what you do is you have other societies that advance, and then I'm getting real like, social studies here, but you have other societies that advance and kind of take that over. And I would this film for me, in that sense, kind of like want to see the society kind of go back to that, because putting men in space, that was like a huge achievement, and that shows what the potential that this country and this society as a whole has. And I would love to see us kind of regain that.
This was all for me to complain about the comment that I put, which is my mom would travel for work. My dad could only make manwich, and that's what we ate for like a week. And so this whole stream is so that I can complain about men not being able to cook. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yes, Kelly, manwich is good, but it gets old fast.
It does.
For the first couple of nights, I was like, cool, it's just me and Dad. And then by the end of it, I was like, Mom, thank God you're back. Like, I'm so hungry for something other than manwich.
As your dad is like, what's wrong with the manwich?
What's wrong with the manwich? It's totally fine. So, yeah, we got off on a tangent, but I think it is important to talk about how this movie does show that both, people of any gender can be just as capable of any skill.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're wrapping up now. Before we get to talking about what's coming up and all that, I want to come back around to talking to Manaro. I used to actually do this back when I first started the stream. Kind of gotten away from it, but I think it'd be fun to go ahead and do it again, which is, we already talked about some of the movies that you're into. I'm so excited that you're a big Lord of the Rings fan of not just the movies but the books too, and you've already let loose that you love Outlander as well, which really excites me. But I'm interested, like, what are some of your other favorite movies that you're into?
Well, yeah, I'm like a sci-fi action geek. I like sci-fi movies, and to me, I also like cheesy sci-fi movies. Like, they don't actually have to have any true substance. As long as the CGI is great, I'll watch it. You know what I mean?
Oh, we have to hear some titles.
John's
Okay.
like, get specific so we can schedule this, Manaro. Come on.
Okay, so I'm really bad with the title, but what was that movie with Cara Delevingne and that dude, where they were like in all these other worlds where they would was it 1,000 Worlds, or what was that movie called?
I know what you're talking about, and the funny thing is I actually own it, but I can't remember the name. Hold on
It's
a
not
second.
Cloud Atlas, is it?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's I'm looking for it. Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets.
Thank
Like,
you.
When are you gonna remember that?
I love that.
I mean,
Now,
Steven's
it
over
didn't
here
get
being
good
like,
reviews.
I got you. He knew.
He didn't get the whole title though.
Okay,
Yeah.
still counts, Steven. I'm giving you the points.
It didn't really get good reviews, but let me tell you, I had a blast watching it.
Especially because I remember I saw it in 3D in theaters, and it was a pretty cool experience, I have to say. And that was actually done by the director of The Fifth Element, which I know is one of Steven's favorite films. We watched it for a watch party in our Slack group. It's like that was so funny because we started the watch parties, and at first it was like just me organizing all these watch parties for all these movies that I wanted everybody else to watch, and then Steven's like, "No, John, one week we're gonna do a movie of my choice," and it was I'm like, "Okay, Steven." But yeah, no, I did enjoy that one, and
I love those kind of movies. Like, I'm a sucker for like colorful CGI sci-fi type movies. So of course I've watched, all the Star Treks, all the Marvel, all the, like, if it's Marvel, DC, well, let me say that I haven't really been too happy on the DC front.
Not when it
Oh
comes
my
to
god,
movies.
that makes you so unique, Manaro.
I have not been like, if I was able to turn off Batman v Superman, you have to know that it had to be bad, because I will watch just about anything, no matter how cheesy it is. And for me to like say, I don't
Nah, I'm
want to
good.
watch this anymore, it had to be bad, because
What are your thoughts in general on Zack Snyder?
My God. And so I haven't seen Justice League. And the reason why I haven't
You don't have to. You really
I
don't.
haven't watched it is because I'm truly afraid. Because I am a huge Wonder Woman. Like, Wonder Woman was the first superhero that I like. Again, I'm kind of old. In the 70s, I used to watch Linda Carter play Wonder Woman. Like, I never missed an episode. I used to have Wonder Woman underoos. I had a Wonder Woman, like, I literally used to use up all of my grandmother's foil, aluminum foil, making myself a tiara. And
I had Micah on my channel to talk about DC movies and shows, and we were saying a lot of like similar things where it's like
I used to take the extension
he hated
cord.
the Justice League movie, and I was like, it's all right.
I used to
It's
use
really
my
not,
jump rope
Amy.
as my lasso of truth, as I would wear my Wonder Woman underoos, and she would look at me like, I can't believe I am like, what are you doing? She goes, and I'm like, I'm Wonder Woman, and I used to wear a towel around my neck for my cape. It was like, yeah, so it was very, like, I enjoyed the Wonder Woman movie. I did enjoy it, but I was scared to watch Justice League because I grew up watching, I watched the Justice League cartoon, so without me going too much on a tangent. Yeah, Star Wars, like, I will, if it's sci-fi, I'm huge into Doctor Who. I've watched a lot of sci-fi shows, and I'm a huge anime fan. Like, I've watched a lot of anime movies or anime shows. Between Hulu is like my first love for anime. And then
I know you're gonna ask, Amy, so just go ahead.
About Princess Mononoke?
No, she mentioned anime. You guys always have to bring something up when anime is mentioned, so go ahead.
I've already watched Princess Mononoke.
Have you seen Attack on Titan?
Yeah, well, I have seen Attack on Titan.
I haven't seen the latest season.
I have to say this. I'm not a huge fan of blood and gore. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it. Like, I watch it, but I'm not a huge fan of it. And sometimes for me, I have to figure out a way to get over the blood and gore to get to the true essence of the story. Because Attack on Titan is a really good story, but sometimes I just can't get over the whole giants eating people thing. Like, to me,
it's a thing.
That's like, oh, I just, and so because I'm always like in anticipation of when's the next giant gonna come around, and it's giants that don't have skin. Like,
oh yeah, it's really creepy.
It can't be any more. It can't be any more disturbing than that. It's just I haven't made it past the first season because I still need to get over that. But it is an excellent story from what I've watched so far. But I'm more of a Shonen type of anime watcher, like Durara, Naruto, Bleach. And some new movies that they've come out with. I also, another sidebar, I put up that I was gonna go talk about Dogma. I know I put a stream up and totally forgot about it. I went to bed and I woke up the next day and I was like, I think I was supposed to do something yesterday and I can't remember what it was. And I go to say, you know what? I need to go set up the stream for Dogma. And I noticed that I did it and the day passed and I never was like, story of my life. So, yeah. So yeah, I love action movies. And again, I don't watch action movies for substance. I just need to make that very clear. I do not watch action movies necessarily for the substance. Like, I don't expect to hear great like lines delivered because they're more often great lines. They're just one-liners. That's all I watch the action movies for. The one-liners and the action. So yes, I've watched all the Fast and Furious. Yes, I've watched all of Jason Statham movies. Yeah, like if it's an action movies, I've probably watched it. And if you're asking me, what did you think of it? I'm only going to tell you, I thought the action was great. Don't ask me about the plot line, really. Don't ask me about the acting, because
that's not what it's for.
Nobody, it's not like action movies of like the 80s and the 90s. You know what I mean? There's no real depth. And as much as they try to bring depth to these action movies, you're really not going to get it. That's not what this is for. And I love a good thriller every now and then. But me, I don't watch action movies for substance. I watch it for the action. And I get real giddy about the CGI. So yeah. And I still watch The Mummy from time to time because Brendan Fraser's Mummy is the only mummy that I will ever truly love.
I adore that. I don't care what anybody says. Still, like one of my all-time favorite like popcorn movies. It's just ridiculously entertaining. So I'm sure we can find something in there. I can guarantee you though, based on comments that Amy and I made over on her channel, we probably won't be doing the Fast and the Furious movies.
I could do Tokyo Drift and that's it.
Well, I can't. So
yeah. Like listen, listen, Brendan Fraser in the like, come on. Like if and that's no disrespect to Tom Cruise. Like for me, Tom Cruise should
I'm sorry, did that even happen? I don't recall that it actually happened.
Also, this is a very disrespect Tom Cruise channel, at least for me. Not a fan.
Tom Cruise, I love Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible. Like that's what I love Tom Cruise for. Like to me, there will be no other Ethan Hunt other than Tom Cruise because the man has balls of steel. Like I watch those Mission Impossible to see what kind of stunt he's gonna do. Like that's pretty much what I don't watch it for substance. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm sorry, Amy. I really do love the Mission Impossible movies.
I love the Mission Impossible.
It is the way it is.
But I don't watch them for substance. Like that, and that's not to take away from Tom Cruise as an actor. I think he's a great actor. But I don't really watch it necessarily.
Well, I will say I think there's a lot of great artistry behind those films, especially the last one they did was probably one of the best action films I've seen in a really long time, just because of the way it was made and the audacity of some of those stunts.
Oh my God.
They're insane.
Like his stunts are insane, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to watch it. It's like one of those things that you just can't tear yourself away from. Well, I cannot take. I won't speak for anybody else, but I just can't take. Like, and every time I want to see Tom Cruise really truly act, I always look up Les Grossman from Tropic Thunder whenever I want a good Tom Cruise moment, because no matter
I
what,
do not agree with this statement, but
I
is
put
great.
it up. I own this. I put up this comment about Tom Cruise being overrated.
No matter what nobody says, Tom Cruise as Les Grossman, other than him playing Lestat, Tom Cruise as Les Grossman is like the best character ever. Like ever.
I think Tropic Thunder is like one of my all-time biggest guilty pleasures because I really do have a blast watching that.
Oh my God, it's the best. It is like there's so many tropes in that movie. It's like insane. It's insane. I love it.
I'm sorry, Light, and see this is a reason why I don't know if we could ever do it on the channel, because there's some really not correct stuff in there, but pretty much everything with Robert Downey Jr.
Listen, don't be afraid to do Tropic Thunder, dude. Don't be afraid. I'm telling you, go for it. Tropic Thunder is one of those. It's a classic. It's one of those classics that will never die. It is. I think Ben Stiller. That's one of Ben Stiller's like greatest masterpieces. Like Tropic Thunder was
Stiller's
a masterpiece.
great.
I'm a dude playing a dude pretending to be another
Pretending
dude.
to be the other dude. Yes. Yeah. So every time I'm having a bad day, I put on I YouTube Les Grossman, and I'm right as rain every time I see a Les.
You know what? Maybe that's what we have to do next time.
I
you
think,
come
yeah,
on.
I think that's
maybe
what needs
it's
to happen.
Tropic Thunder.
I think we just need to do more comedies in general. I know we did Mean Girls and we've done a couple of others.
I
but
know
we just
you
need
do
to some
because
more
you're
comedy.
always pushing for comedy.
Because I love comedies.
Comedies are great, and I don't really watch what is called or considered chick flicks or romantic.
Again, but Amy and I did a whole stream which was all about me saying men need to embrace the chick flick.
Yeah.
Because
I don't do rom-coms too often. Like I may watch one every once in a while, but I really have to be.
Have
in
you
the
seen The
mood for it.
Proposal?
Well, see,
Yes, I've seen The Proposal. I've seen The
Wow,
Lake
yeah.
House. I've seen The Notebook. I've seen rom-coms. And honestly, can I be honest with you guys? The only reason why I watched them was because I had to go out on a date and watch them. And the guy probably thought I wanted to watch it. And I was like, I wish you'd have asked me what I wanted to see because this wasn't it. But hey, we're here.
Quoted
yeah,
for
I'm
truth,
not a-
Stephen. They're called romance movies, and I love them. I have Lord of the Rings takes my top place, and then I have Pride and Prejudice. Just saying.
I love Pride and Prejudice. I've read the book like I don't know, a billion times. That and Jane Eyre. Like I love reading those. Those are like my two top period pieces that literature that I love to read. I never get into Wuthering Heights. I could never get into that. I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. But Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibilities, and Jane Eyre, I love those. And I've watched the two versions of Jane Eyre, but I've only seen the Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice.
Seriously, like that movie transformed me because I saw that, and I told the story on the other stream, but it's like I still remember the experience of sitting there. I'm about halfway through the movie, and I'm like, I'm just hoping against hope that Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy get together. What's wrong with me? And I was never the same after that. So
I agree with you, Guilty Undertaker. Wuthering Heights is a horror story pretending to be it's a disaster. It's like a disaster of a romance. Like I don't know. Yeah, Proposal. I love Proposal. Proposal was
I really
or
liked
2
it.
weeks notice. I love 2 weeks notice. Like I think Sandra Bullock was a really great in rom-coms. And I think that's probably why I watched them. But then again, I loved her in Demolition Man. So there's that. There is that.
good. So I think we do have lots to work with now, but it's probably going to be Tropic Thunder. Okay, so let's go into talking about what is coming up on Cinematic Realms. Next week, we are going to have the wonderful Geaullie on to talk with us about Selma, which is going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to have her on, another first-time guest. But we talk with her all the time because she is, of course, a treasured member of our Slack group and the resident of the never-ending Zoom call that we all get on. She runs the show. So so she's going to be joining us. And then the week after that, we're actually going to be doing something quite a bit different. AK is going to be coming on to talk with us, and she wanted to do it's a television film called the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which I have never seen before. To be honest, I hadn't heard of it, so I'm really looking forward.
So I'm excited for that.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to checking that out, and then coming after that, there might be some surprises coming. We have something cooking, so just stay tuned. Amy, what do you have coming up over on your channel?
So I put together a handy banner of all of my links. I'm a podcast now, so you can find me on Anchor, Podbean, Spotify. I'm all over the place. And those are basically my YouTube videos as audio. And I just recorded my first episode of about Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I'm officially an Last Airbender content creator. And it's also, all of that is a companion to my blog. So I have a lot coming up. I am going to go live on my channel next Friday, the 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern for my third episode of Buddy Banter. This was the first buddy I bantered with, John, over here.
Watch it. Watch it, watch it, watch it.
Yes, please watch it or listen to it as a podcast. So basically, you can find me anywhere by searching Amy, A-E-M-Y, and then Blackfire with a Y. And like I said, I'm on Anchor and I am on Spotify and all of that. And YouTube. You have to, on YouTube, you have to do youtube.com/Amy Blackfire. If you search it, it will say Army Blackfire. You want to know about the Blackfire Army. That's not what you want to know about. You want my channel. So that's what you want to do. So that's when I'm going live, and I do that once a month. I go live on my channel, but otherwise everything is recorded. My next Avatar: Last Airbender episode is going to be about the Air Nation. I'm going to have a full panel with Steven Stark, Archmaester Buzzkill, who has a channel called and podcast called Through the Moon Door, and also Lady Triple. So we're going to have a good time talking about that. And then Bleep the Patriarchy. Bleep it, y'all. I'm going to be over on Nessie's channel. Oh, John's already taking a swig against the patriarchy. I'm going to be on the Unspun Yarn Nessie's channel February 10th. That's a Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, live with Lo the Links, and we are going to talk about the binary. Oh, also that Buddy Banter on Friday is also with Lo, because I love them so much and I can't get enough of that. And we have a couple named Lomi, or Lami, so that's us. So we're so that
I'm
Bleep the
jealous.
Patriarchy. And then a Song of Ice and Fire content I have coming up. I'm going to talk about black and white symbolism and yin and yang symbolism, and I'm going to have this guy named Bronze Staries on. Those in the chat know him as Bronte.
I don't know him.
Yeah, he's whatever. Then I have I also have an upcoming episode about Mulan and comparing her to Brave Danny Flint and Alara / Sorella, and this idea of women dressing as men in A Song of Ice and Fire. And then finally, his Dark Materials. I have a video about Mary Malone, and I'm going to have Lo on for that. And then I'm also going to have one on Marissa Coulter and her monkey demon and monkey imagery. So, yeah, Bronze Staries, aka my bae. It's going to be on, so that'll be fun.
And since you were throwing up banners, let me just throw up some more, because of course, Amy and I, along with Jared, who may or may not exist, and Kate, are also known as the Knights of Kira. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. So please do follow us. If you also love the one true queen, please do check us out at those links. Anyway, okay, Manaro, so go ahead, plug away. What do you have coming up?
The only thing that's truly important that I have coming up is I will be on with Radio Westeros next week, Saturday. We are going to be continuing. They have a series that they're doing, their Winds of Winter primer. And I believe we're going to be talking about House Dane next week, Saturday. So I will be on with them for that. I'm excited and nervous at the same time. I almost feel like, wow, how did this happen? Like, even being on with you guys, I'm like, wow, how did that happen?
Because you're talented and amazing, Manaro. And humble, obviously. But brag about yourself, girl. Go ahead.
And other than that, you'll probably have to just subscribe to my channel to see what else I come up with.
Ginger ale chat.
I need to do an all guys ginger ale chat. That has to happen. And maybe I should do that for my birthday. My birthday month is in May. And I think that would
I'm
be
a May baby too.
I think that would be a great way for me to celebrate my birthday, is to have an all male ginger ale chat,
and to make me turn really red for the entire stream.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, it's gonna be okay. I promise. No one has ever been hurt
Make sure you follow Manaro on Twitter as well to get updates about what she's up to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
John,
absolutely.
we need to plug Here Be Dragons as well.
Oh wait, is that happening? Who can keep track? I will be on Here Be Dragons tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about the final 4 episodes of The Expanse. What a season, y'all. And a lot happened in that final episode, so we're going to be unpacking it all. And it's going to be me, Stephen, Nessie, and I believe we're also going to be joined by Bernie. So please make sure you come check that out. And oh my God, Manaro, you just muted. And I'm like, what happened? Did all the sound go out? Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow. And Steven is saying he wants to do that.
He's already on. If I was going to invite John, I could not leave Steve out. You already know you're going to be on there. I'm trying to see who else I can bring on the panel. Other than you two guys.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I know two. I already know one person that I definitely have to have. So that'll be 3 of you guys. So I just need to bring on 2 more to make it.
See, this is how out of the loop I am. So apparently we're not just having Bernie on, we're having AK and maybe Maester Mary as well. I knew none of this. So I've
You're hearing it live, folks.
I've been off and I've been so like building up to this stream. It's like, Here Be Dragons, what's that?
I have to
do that
I'm preparing to binge The Expanse because I actually wanted to wait until the entire season was done before I watched it, because that's how I roll. I can't do week by week. I have to have the whole. But I know you guys have to watch
that person will agree with you, but I actually prefer week by week.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I'm a pro binge. If you're going to be doing content on that, Manaro, have me on, because I haven't been on YouTube to talk about The Expanse at all. No one's invited me on any Expanse things.
I started it out with T Baby, so I can't leave her out of the
loop. Of course you got to have T Baby.
So we're both actually gonna be getting ready to binge it. So definitely look out for me to tap you on Twitter to say, hey, we're ready to go.
Sounds good.
That's like, okay, so turns out that AK was just added less than an hour ago, and Mary is still uncertain. So I'm not a bad co-host. So
the point is you need to tune in to Here Be Dragons every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern to find out.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you guys so much. This was just an absolute blast, and I love that we went off the rails at many points.
And thanks to everyone in the chat for all of your contributions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so next week will be Selma with Geaullie, and we're just going to have a blast. And once again, thank you, Manaro, for coming on. And we really want to have you back. Turns out it's probably going to be for Tropic Thunder. Who knew? So yeah, that'll be a blast. Stephen is telling me I'm not a bad co-host. So I'm okay. I'm okay. So thank you guys, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful night, and we will see you next week.